The red lights flashed across the command center as Commander Zara Veltar stared at the massive screen before her. Her blue-scaled hands gripped the metal railing so hard that her knuckles turned white. The display showed hundreds of dark ships, surrounding Kepler Station like hungry wolves around a dying campfire. "How many?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. 237 enemy vessels, Commander," replied Lieutenant Krall, a young officer whose tentacles trembled as he spoke. "They have us completely surrounded." Zara closed her eyes for a moment. 200 ships of the Void Hunters versus their single station. The math was simple and brutal. They were all going to die. The Void Hunters had appeared 5 years ago from the dark center of the galaxy. Nobody knew where they came from or what they wanted. They just came and destroyed everything in their path. 17 star systems had fallen to them already. Billions of lives lost. Entire species wiped out forever. Their ships were massive, black things that seemed to eat light itself. You could not see them coming until they were close enough to kill you. They moved in perfect formation like a school of deadly fish. No communication. No mercy. No survivors. Dr. Keth Morden rushed into the command center, his forearms carrying data tablets and his face showing pure fear. "Commander, the shields are failing. We have maybe 3 hours before they break completely." Zara looked around the command center at the faces of her crew. Centaurians like herself with blue scales, avians with bright feathers and sharp beaks, crystalline beings whose bodies caught the light like living diamonds. The peaceful Nalari whose large eyes showed their telepathic sorrow. All of them afraid. All of them knowing this was the end. Kepler Station was huge, a metal city floating in space that housed 2 million refugees. They were the last survivors of the Great Galactic Federation. Every other station, every other fleet, every other world had fallen to the Void Hunters. This was it. The final stand. "Sir," called out Ensign Mora from the communication station, "we are receiving requests for evacuation from all sectors. The civilians are panicking." Captain Rex Holt stepped forward from the back of the command center. He was human, one of only 3 humans on the entire station. His species had been discovered just 20 years ago. Most people thought humans were interesting, but not very important. Their planet Earth was far away and primitive compared to Federation technology. "I can help organize the evacuations," Rex said in his calm voice. "My people are good at staying calm during emergencies." Zara looked at him with surprise. Most species would be falling apart by now, but the 3 humans on her station seemed almost relaxed. It was strange. "Very well, Captain. Take charge of civilian operations." Rex nodded and left quickly. Zara turned back to the tactical display. The Void Hunter ships were moving closer, their dark forms barely visible against the black of space. Soon, they would begin their final attack. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked quickly to prepare for the wounded that would soon arrive. She was another human, a small woman with dark hair and steady hands. The alien doctors and nurses around her moved with panic, but she remained focused on her work. "Dr. Rodriguez," called out Physician Zelak, a tall avian with golden feathers, "should we not evacuate the medical bay? When the attack begins—" "We stay," Elena said firmly. "People will need medical help. We cannot abandon them." Zelak stared at her with his large bird-like eyes. The human was either very brave or very foolish, perhaps both. In Sector 7, Lieutenant Jake Morrison checked his weapons for the 10th time. He was the 3rd human on the station, a security officer responsible for protecting the civilian areas. His team was a mix of different species, all of them scared but trying to hide it. "Sir," said Corporal Vex, a Centaurian with nervous twitches in his blue tail, "the enemy will break through our defenses easily. Should we not focus on evacuation rather than fighting?" Jake looked at his team. They were good people, but they had already given up hope. He had seen this before in other battles. When people believed they could not win, they usually did not even try. "We fight," Jake said simply. "We make them work for every meter. We buy time for the civilians to get to the emergency shelters." "But sir, We cannot win against the Void Hunters. No one has ever defeated them. Jake smiled, though there was no humor in it. Nobody has ever defeated them yet. That does not mean it cannot be done. Back in the command center, the first enemy ships reached weapons range. Dark energy beams lanced out from the Void Hunter fleet, striking the station's shields. The entire structure shook like a tree in a storm. Shields down to 60%, reported Keth. They are targeting the shield generators specifically. Zara watched the tactical display with growing despair. The enemy knew exactly how to attack them. They had done this before to hundreds of other stations and planets. It was just a matter of time. "Commander," said the communications officer, "should we send out a final distress call?" Zara hesitated. Who would answer? Every Federation fleet was destroyed. Every allied world had fallen. But maybe, somewhere in the galaxy, someone would hear their message. Someone would remember that they had tried to make a stand. Yes, send it on all frequencies. Tell them that Kepler Station fought to the end. The message went out into the dark void of space, a final cry for help from the last survivors of galactic civilization. Nobody expected an answer. Nobody believed help would come. The Void Hunter ships moved closer, their dark hulls blocking out the stars. Soon the real battle would begin, and then it would all be over. The last light of the galaxy would finally go out forever. The first explosion shook the entire station. Emergency lights flashed red as the Void Hunters began their boarding assault. Dark metal pods crashed through the outer hull, tearing holes in the station's protective shell like bullets through paper. Commander Zara watched her tactical display in horror as dozens of breach points appeared across the station. All security teams to defensive positions. Seal off damaged sections. The mechanical soldiers that poured from the boarding pods were nightmares made real. Tall skeletal frames of black metal moved with perfect coordination. Their red sensor, eyes swept back and forth like searchlights looking for prey. Energy weapons were built into their arms, glowing with deadly blue light. In Sector 7, Jake Morrison heard the sound of metal footsteps echoing through the corridors. His team was positioned behind makeshift barriers made from tables and wall panels. The civilians were crying and screaming in the shelters behind them. "Here they come," Jake whispered into his communicator. "Remember, aim for the joints and sensor arrays. Do not waste shots on their armor." The first Void Hunter rounded the corner, its red eyes immediately finding Jake's position. It raised its arm weapon without hesitation. Jake dove sideways as blue energy burned through the air where his head had been a second before. Corporal Vex fired his plasma rifle at the machine. The shot hit center mass but bounced off harmlessly. The Void Hunter turned toward Vex with mechanical precision and fired. Vex screamed as the energy beam caught his shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the floor. Jake rolled behind cover and pulled out a small explosive device. It was not military grade, just a mining charge he had found in the maintenance bay. He set the timer for 3 seconds and threw it at the Void Hunter's feet. The explosion was small but effective. The machine staggered, its left leg damaged and sparking. Jake immediately fired 3 shots at its exposed joint. The third shot found its mark, and the Void Hunter crashed to the ground, its red eyes flickering and going dark. "Did you see that?" gasped Private Nolan, a young avian whose feathers were standing on end with fear. "It actually fell down." "They can be killed," Jake said, reloading his weapon. "They are just machines. Machines can break." More Void Hunters appeared in the corridor. Jake's team fought with desperate courage, using every trick they could think of. They collapsed sections of ceiling to slow the enemy advance. They used reflective panels to confuse the machine sensors. They set up crossfires that caught the Void Hunters from multiple angles. Slowly, impossibly, they began to hold their ground. In the medical bay, Elena Rodriguez worked frantically as the wounded arrived. Her hands never stopped moving as she treated injuries from dozens of different species. A centaurian with burns across his scaled back, an avian with a broken wing, a crystalline being whose body was cracked like broken glass. "Doctor, I do not understand," said Nurse Kayla, a gentle Nalari whose telepathic abilities let her feel the pain of every patient. "How can you stay so calm?" Can you not feel their suffering? Elena looked up from the Centaurian she was treating. Her hands were covered in blue blood, but her voice was steady. I feel it, but fear and panic will not help them. They need me to think clearly. She had been working for 6 hours straight without rest. Other medical staff had collapsed from exhaustion or fled in terror. But Elena continued, moving from patient to patient with mechanical efficiency that would have impressed even a void hunter. A security officer stumbled into the medical bay, half carrying a wounded civilian. Doctor, please, she is dying. Elena took one look at the patient and knew it was hopeless. The injuries were too severe, the blood loss too great. Any other doctor would have moved on to save someone who could be saved. Instead, Elena grabbed an experimental drug from the emergency cabinet. It was designed for avian physiology, but she had an idea. Hold her steady, she told the security officer. This might work. She modified the drug dosage based on her knowledge of different species biology. It was a desperate guess, but the patient's vital signs began to stabilize. The security officer stared in amazement as color returned to the woman's face. How did you know that would work? I did not know, Elena admitted. But sometimes you have to try the impossible. Up in the command center, the situation was getting worse by the hour. More boarding pods crashed through the hull. More sections of the station went dark as Void Hunter teams cut power lines and destroyed critical systems. We have lost contact with sectors 12 through 18, reported Lieutenant Krall. The enemy has control of the main power grid. Dr. Keth ran into the command center, his forearms full of data tablets. Commander, I have been studying the attack patterns. The Void Hunters are not just trying to destroy us, they are systematically dismantling our technology. They want to study how we build things. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. You mean, they learn from each victory? Yes. Every station they capture, every ship they destroy makes them stronger. They adapt. They improve. This explained why the Void Hunters had become more effective with each battle. They were not just destroyers. They were collectors of knowledge, growing more dangerous with every world they conquered. Captain Rex appeared on the main screen via communicator. He was in the civilian sectors, organizing evacuation procedures. Behind him, Zara could see families of different species working together, helping each other reach the emergency shelters. Commander, we have evacuated 80% of the civilians from the compromised sectors, but we need more time. How much time? 6 hours. Maybe 8, if we are lucky. Zara looked at her tactical display. At the current rate of Void Hunter advance, they had maybe 2 hours before the station fell completely. The math was simple and brutal. We do not have 6 hours, Captain. Rex was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised everyone. In the command center. Then we make more time. Before Zara could ask what he meant, the communication link went dead. On her tactical display, she watched as security teams across the station began fighting with renewed intensity. Somehow, impossibly, they were slowing the Void Hunter advance. In Sector 7, Jake Morrison rallied his exhausted team for another defensive stand. They had been fighting for hours, falling back step by step, but they had not broken. Other teams were reporting similar success. The mechanical invaders were still advancing, but much slower than their usual pace. Sir, called out Corporal Vex, his wounded shoulder wrapped in emergency bandages. The enemy is adapting to our tactics. They are learning. Jake nodded grimly. Then we learn faster. The battle raged on through the corridors of Kepler Station. But something had changed. The defenders were no longer just running away. They were fighting back, and some of them were winning. The Void Hunters had never encountered resistance like this before. For the first time in their existence, they faced an enemy that refused to give up, no matter how hopeless the situation became. Deep in the darkness of space, far from the dying light of Kepler Station, something stirred. The USS Defiance floated silently near the edge of the galaxy, its hull painted black to blend with the void. Admiral John Carter stood on the bridge, his weathered face lit by the glow of star charts. Sir, we are receiving a distress signal, reported Communications Officer Beth Wilson. Her voice was calm but urgent. "It is from Kepler Station." Carter moved to the communications console and listened to the desperate message. Commander Veltar's voice crackled through the speakers, filled with fear and determination. 2 million civilians, the last Federation outpost, under attack by over 200 Void Hunter ships. "How far are we from their position?" Carter asked. 18 hours at maximum speed, sir," answered Navigator Paul Hayes from his station. "But, sir, the tactical data shows they are completely surrounded, even if we arrive in time." Carter studied the star map display. Kepler Station was a tiny dot of light surrounded by an ocean of red enemy markers. It looked hopeless. Any reasonable military commander would call it a lost cause. But Carter was not just any commander. He had spent the last 3 years preparing for exactly this kind of fight. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships prepare for emergency jump. Destination, Kepler Station." Captain Lisa Zhang appeared on the main screen from her ship, the USS Vengeance. "Admiral, are you certain about this? If we fail, Earth will be defenseless." Carter looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were scared but ready. These men and women had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. They knew what was at stake. "Captain Zhang, how long have we been preparing for this moment?" 3 years, sir." "And what have we learned in those 3 years?" Lisa smiled grimly. "That the Void Hunters are not as invincible as everyone thinks." Carter nodded. The human fleet had been created in secret, built specifically to fight the mechanical invaders. While other species focused on running away or building bigger shields, humans had studied their enemy. They had captured damaged Void Hunter technology. They had analyzed their tactics. They had found weaknesses. Dr. Alan Brooks entered the bridge, carrying a small device that looked like a computer tablet. He was thin and nervous, but his eyes burned with scientific curiosity. "Admiral, the Pandora virus is ready for deployment. But I must warn you, we have never tested it on this scale." "Will it work, Doctor?" "In theory, yes. The Void Hunters use a shared network to coordinate their attacks. If we can inject the virus into their system, it should spread to every ship in their fleet." "And if it does not work?" Brooks pushed his glasses up his nose nervously. "Then we die fighting, sir." Carter laughed, a sound that surprised everyone on the bridge. "Doctor, that was going to happen anyway. At least this way we have a chance to take them with us." The human fleet consisted of 12 ships, each one unique and deadly. The USS Defiance was the flagship, armed with kinetic weapons that could punch through any known armor. The USS Vengeance carried thousands of attack drones. The USS Liberty had experimental energy shields. Each ship represented years of human engineering and innovation. They were not like Federation vessels, which followed standard designs and used predictable tactics. Human ships were built by people who had spent their entire history fighting each other. They knew how to think creatively in battle. They knew how to adapt quickly to new situations. "All ships report ready for jump, Admiral," announced Lieutenant Dan Foster from the tactical station. Carter walked to the center of the bridge and activated the fleet-wide communication system. On screens throughout the 12 ships, human faces looked back at him. Young and old, men and women, all of them volunteers who had left their families behind to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. "People of Earth," Carter began, his voice steady and strong. "Today we face an enemy that has destroyed entire civilizations. They have conquered 17 star systems and killed billions of innocent people. Everyone in the galaxy believes they cannot be stopped." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "But they have never fought humans before." Across the fleet, crew members straightened in their seats. Some smiled. Others simply nodded with grim determination. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the smartest or the most advanced. But we have something they do not understand. We have something they have never encountered. We refuse to quit." Carter's voice grew stronger. "The Federation gave up hope. Other species ran away or surrendered, but we are human. We do not surrender, we do not run away. We fight." The Admiral activated the jump sequence. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace. We are going to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity's friends." The 12 human warships disappeared into hyperspace, leaving only empty space behind. They were racing toward a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Either humanity would prove itself worthy of respect, or they would die trying. Inside the hyperspace tunnel, the ships pushed their engines beyond safe limits. Normal hyperspace travel took careful navigation and slow acceleration. The human fleet threw caution aside, diving through the dimensional gateway like bullets fired from a gun. Captain Zhang monitored her ship's systems as they flew toward their destiny. Engineering? How are the engines holding up? Temperature is in the red zone, Captain, replied Chief Engineer Mike Collins. But they will hold together long enough. Good. We only need them to work for one more battle. Throughout the human fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Systems were pushed to their breaking point. Safety protocols were ignored. Risk was accepted as the price of speed. They had 18 hours to reach Kepler Station, but with their engines screaming at maximum power, they would make it in 12. The question was whether they would arrive in time to save anyone, or just in time to avenge them. In the depths of hyperspace, humanity raced toward its first real test as a galactic power. Behind them lay Earth, small and vulnerable. Ahead lay the unknown, where 2 million lives hung in the balance and the future of the galaxy would be decided by 12 ships against impossible odds. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system like 12 falling stars. Every ship powered up their weapons and shields at the same time, creating massive energy signatures that lit up sensors across the entire system. It was not a quiet arrival. It was an announcement. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and watched the tactical display. 237 Void Hunter ships surrounded Kepler Station like a swarm of black insects. The station itself was badly damaged, with fires burning in several sections and debris floating around it like broken teeth. "Signal from Kepler Station, sir," reported Beth Wilson. "Commander Veltar is requesting immediate assistance." "Tell her help has arrived," Carter replied. "All ships, attack formation Delta. Target their command vessels first." The Void Hunter fleet immediately began turning to face this new threat. Their dark ships moved with perfect coordination, forming attack lines and preparing to destroy these 12 small vessels that dared to challenge them. Captain Lisa Zhang opened a communication channel from the USS Vengeance. "Admiral, they outnumber us 20-1. Standard tactics suggest we should retreat and call for reinforcements." Carter smiled grimly. "Captain, when have humans ever used standard tactics?" The battle began with the USS Defiance firing the first shot. Instead of energy beams like most space weapons, the human ship launched a solid metal rod accelerated to incredible speed by magnetic fields. The tungsten projectile, no bigger than a telephone pole, struck a Void Hunter cruiser with the force of a nuclear bomb. The enemy ship simply disappeared. One moment it was there, the next it was an expanding cloud of metal fragments and energy. On Kepler Station, Commander Zara watched her sensors in amazement. How did they do that? That ship had full shields. Dr. Keth studied the readings with his 4 arms moving rapidly across his control panels. The projectile was moving at nearly 30% light speed. At that velocity, shields are useless. The kinetic energy alone. Another Void Hunter ship exploded as the USS Liberty scored a direct hit. Then another. The human fleet was not fighting like any military force the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Zhang's ship, the USS Vengeance, suddenly opened up like a flower blooming. Thousands of small drones poured out, each one no bigger than a basketball. They swarmed toward the Void Hunter fleet like angry bees. The mechanical ships tried to shoot down the drones, but there were too many of them. For every drone they destroyed, 10 more got through. The small robots attached themselves to Void Hunter hulls and began cutting through armor with plasma torches. But these were not just attack drones. Each one carried a small computer virus designed by Dr. Brooks. As they cut into the enemy ships, they tried to connect with Void Hunter networks and upload their deadly cargo. The USS Freedom spun like a dancer, its unusual design allowing it to rotate while firing in all directions. Energy beams and missile trails created a deadly web around the ship as it tore through a formation of Void Hunter fighters. Admiral Carter watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. The human ships were smaller and outnumbered, but they fought, with chaos and creativity that the mechanical minds could not predict or counter. "Sir, we are getting reports from the boarding teams," announced Lieutenant Foster. "The Void Hunters inside Kepler Station have stopped advancing. Some of them appear to be malfunctioning." Dr. Brooks looked up from his console with excitement. "The virus is working. The drones have established connection points with their network. Pandora is spreading through their system." On the main tactical display, Carter could see the effect. Void Hunter ships were beginning to move erratically. Some fired on their own allies. Others spun in circles as their navigation systems failed. The perfect coordination that made them so deadly was breaking down. Jake Morrison, still fighting inside Kepler Station, noticed the change immediately. The mechanical soldiers in front of him suddenly stopped moving in formation. One of them fired at the ceiling instead of at his team. Another walked straight into a wall and kept trying to walk forward, its legs moving uselessly. "What is happening to them?" asked Corporal Vex, limping forward on his wounded leg. "I do not know," Jake replied, "but let us take advantage of it." His security team launched a counterattack, pushing the confused Void Hunters back toward their boarding pods. For the first time since the battle began, they were advancing instead of retreating. In the medical bay, Elena Rodriguez felt the station shake as explosions echoed through the hull. But these were different explosions. They sounded like enemy ships being destroyed, not the station taking damage. "Doctor," called out Nurse Kayla, her telepathic abilities picking up emotions from across the station. "I sense something strange. There is hope. People are feeling hope again." Elena looked out through a small window and saw flashes of light in space. Human ships danced between the dark Void Hunter vessels, their weapons creating brilliant displays against the black of space. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The tide of battle turned completely when Dr. Brooks successfully uploaded the complete Pandora virus into a Void Hunter command ship. The virus spread through their network like wildfire, causing every mechanical ship in the fleet to experience critical system failures. Void Hunter vessels began firing on each other as their targeting computers became confused. Navigation systems sent ships crashing into asteroids or spinning out of control. Communication networks filled with garbage data that made coordination impossible. Admiral Carter seized the moment. "All ships, full assault. Target the disabled vessels. Do not let any of them escape." The human fleet pressed their attack with ruthless efficiency. Ship after ship of the once mighty Void Hunter armada was destroyed or crippled. The mechanical race that had terrorized the galaxy for 5 years was finally experiencing defeat. Captain Zhang's voice came over the communication system, filled with excitement and disbelief. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is in full retreat." "We have won." Carter looked at the tactical display. Of the 237 Void Hunter ships that had attacked Kepler Station, fewer than 50 remained functional. Those were fleeing as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. "Signal Kepler Station," Carter ordered. "Tell them the immediate threat has passed." On the screen, Commander Veltar's face appeared. Her blue scales were darker with exhaustion, but her eyes showed something that had been missing for years. Hope. "Admiral Carter, I do not know how to thank you. We had given up all hope of survival." Carter nodded respectfully. "Commander, humanity does not abandon its friends. We heard your call for help, and we came." The battle was over, but both leaders knew this was just the beginning. The war against the Void Hunters would continue, but now the galaxy had a new weapon in that fight. They had humanity, and humans did not know how to quit. The silence after battle was strange and peaceful. Floating wreckage from destroyed Void Hunter ships drifted past the windows of Kepler Station like metal snow. Admiral Carter stood in the station's command center, looking out at the debris field that had once been an unstoppable enemy fleet. Commander Zara Veltar approached him slowly, her blue scales still showing the stress marks of the long battle. "Admiral, I owe you an apology. My people believed humans were just another minor species. We were wrong." Carter turned to face her. His uniform was dirty and his face showed exhaustion, but his eyes were clear and determined. "Commander, you do not owe us anything. We all fight for the same thing. We fight for survival. Dr. Keth Morden rushed over with excitement, his forearms full of data tablets. Admiral, the information we captured from the Void Hunter ships is incredible. We can learn so much about their technology, their weaknesses, their plans. What kind of plans? Carter asked. They have been preparing to attack the core worlds of the galaxy. Earth is on their target list, along with every major Federation planet. But now we have their attack schedules, their ship designs, everything. Carter nodded grimly. This victory was important, but it was just the beginning. The Void Hunters would not give up because of one defeat. They would adapt and return stronger than before. Captain Rex Holt appeared on the main screen from somewhere deep in the civilian sectors. Behind him, people of dozens of different species were working together to repair damage and care for the wounded. Admiral, I have the casualty reports. We lost 3,000 defenders, but we saved over 1,900,000 civilians. The numbers were sobering. 3,000 lives lost, but nearly 2 million saved. In any other battle against the Void Hunters, everyone would have died. This was the first time anyone had survived their attack. Jake Morrison entered the command center, his security uniform torn and burned. His left arm was in a medical sling, but he was walking and alert. Sir, we have secured all boarding areas. The mechanical soldiers have been destroyed or captured. How many of your team survived? Lieutenant? Carter asked. Jake's face darkened for a moment. Half, sir, but we held the line. The civilians are safe. Elena Rodriguez was the last to arrive, her medical clothes stained with blood from a dozen different species. She looked exhausted, but satisfied. All critical patients are stable. We saved everyone we could save. Carter looked around at these people who had fought against impossible odds and won. The humans had proven themselves, but so had every other species on the station. When the final test came, they had all stood together. Commander Veltar, Carter said formally, I need to discuss terms with the Federation leadership. Zara activated the long-range communication system. Soon, the command center was filled with holographic images of Federation leaders from across the galaxy. Avian generals with bright feathers, crystalline scientists whose bodies sparkled like diamonds, Centaurian politicians with nervous expressions. Admiral Carter, said High Chancellor Vorth, an elderly avian whose golden feathers had turned white with age. The Federation owes humanity a great debt. How can we repay you? Carter's expression became serious. Chancellor, humanity asks for 3 things. First, we want full membership in the Federation with equal voting rights. Second, we want to share our anti-Void Hunter technology with all allied species. Third, we want to lead the military campaign against the remaining Void Hunter forces. There was silence as the Federation leaders considered this. Some looked uncomfortable with giving so much power to a species they had considered primitive just days before. That is quite a lot to ask, said Councillor Zek, a Centaurian whose blue scales showed his nervousness. Perhaps we could start with associate membership and see how things develop. Carter shook his head. Counselor, with respect, there is no time for gradual changes. The Void Hunters are still out there. They will adapt to our tactics and return with stronger forces. We need to hit them hard and fast before they can recover. Dr. Brooks stepped forward, still carrying his computer tablet. If I may, the virus we use today will only work once. The Void Hunters will develop countermeasures within weeks. Our window of opportunity is very small. High Chancellor Vorth looked around at the other Federation leaders. Their faces showed doubt and fear, but also hope. For the first time in 5 years, someone had actually defeated the Void Hunters. Very well, Admiral Carter. Humanity is granted full Federation membership, effective immediately. You will have joint command of all military operations against the Void Hunters. Carter nodded with satisfaction. Thank you, Chancellor. I promise you will not regret this decision. The communication ended, and Carter turned to his new allies. Commander Veltar, we need to start reconstruction of this station immediately. It will be our forward base for operations against the Void Hunters. What do you need from us? Zara asked. Everything. Ships, weapons, personnel, intelligence. But most importantly, I need you to help me teach other Federation forces how to fight like we fought today." Jake Morrison stepped forward. "Sir, if I may ask, what makes you so confident we can win this war?" Carter smiled, and for the first time since the battle, he looked truly relaxed. "Lieutenant, 5 years ago the Void Hunters appeared and everyone assumed they were invincible. Today we proved that assumption was wrong. Tomorrow we prove it again." Elena Rodriguez joined the conversation. "Admiral, what about the wounded Void Hunter ships we captured? What do we do with them?" "We study them. We learn from them. We turn their own technology against them." Carter looked out at the debris field again. The galaxy gave up hope because they thought the Void Hunters could not be beaten. But humanity never learned how to give up hope. Captain Rex appeared on screen again. "Admiral, I have good news. The civilian population wants to volunteer for reconstruction work. Every species working together." Carter nodded with approval. "That is exactly what we need. Unity, cooperation, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat." 6 months later, Kepler Station was stronger than it had ever been. Human engineering techniques had rebuilt the damaged sections with better armor and more powerful weapons. Ships from across the galaxy arrived daily, bringing volunteers to join the growing fleet. In the main hangar bay, Jake Morrison trained security teams from a dozen different species in human tactical methods. His students learned to think creatively, to adapt quickly, and to never give up even when facing impossible odds. Elena Rodriguez established the first multi-species medical training program, teaching doctors and nurses how to treat injuries across different alien biologies. Her techniques saved thousands of lives and earned her respect throughout the galaxy. Admiral Carter stood in his new office overlooking the hangar bays where humans and aliens worked side by side, preparing for the next phase of the war. The Void Hunters were still out there, but they no longer seemed invincible. Humanity had joined the galactic community not as junior members, but as leaders and protectors. They had given the galaxy something it had lost years ago. They had given it hope. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the Void Hunters appeared, the galaxy believed it could be won. And that belief made all the difference.